Morning. Tests 1, 2, 3. All right, let's call the Board of Public Works Capital Assets meeting to order for September 14th. Roll call.
Dukniak here.
Gill's here.
Guzikowski here.
Richards here.
Seifert here.
Scully here.
All righty. Approval of minutes from 8/9/22. Any changes, corrections, or if not,
Oh, it's not.
Yes, I have a correction on the number 4 item, informational. Sentence 2, that should read, the Lakeshore North Park planning study bid was awarded to Edgewater Resources.
okay? Voted? Thanks. Roll call?
Gill second.
Roll call.
Dukniak aye.
Gill, aye.
Guzikowski, aye.
Scully aye.
Alrighty. Informational.
The vouchers.
No, there's number 4.
Or 4, yeah.
Sorry. Just real briefly, the Common Council actions last couple meetings. Number 1, we approved a purchase and sale agreement with Ryan Business Park LLC. So we have entered into a contract for the property at the corner of 13th and Ryan Road, about 14 acres. So we'll be moving forward with that due diligence. The council also awarded the Howell Avenue water main replacement from Groveland to Susan to AW Oaks for about $2.5 million. So that's going to be a very complex project that the utility's taken on. I'm sure they'll bring you, you board members along as that goes on.
Andrew, is that development on 13th and Ryan, is that the one that was like the frontage of Amazon there?
That's correct.
Any other questions or comments? Anything else from Andrew? All right. Number 5, consider a motion to approve the utility vouchers for payment in the amount of $678,000.
Have any questions? Anybody else? Richards will make a motion to approve the vouchers as listed.
Scully seconds.
Roll call.
Dukniak aye.
Gill, aye.
Guzikowski, aye.
Richards, aye.
Scully aye.
Number 6, administrative and operations report.
Just pause for any questions you might have on those.
Utility, no?
Nope, all the folks are out at a conference this week, so don't ask us any hard questions because we'll have to get back to you on the answers.
The engineering side of the water, just wondering if all of those items, Centennial Sanitary Sewer, the Rawson Water Relay, Forest Hill Manor Waterworks Relay, that those are all appropriately budgeted for next year, that we got the money rolling for that. Not that there's gonna be any additional actions. You can just, pose that question to those guys.
Well, we had to make a capital budget amendment to the Howell Avenue relay. 40% black eye on that one? Proving more projects, some have more of the same.
Still have a number of valve repairs and fire hydrants that are out of service. That's gonna have to keep an eye on that. Certainly seems to be some differences in water usages as well. regular city engineer. Design construction updates, Rowan Estates, the PPI one. Saying staff will be contacting homeowners this month requesting their participation in this program. This is tied to, I assume, a sewage district.
Yes, this
Money.
is through that PPI program with MMSD. The letters actually were mailed out last week, and we're receiving calls and questions. Actually, this week we started receiving those, and we're starting to receive the waivers for approval. So we're getting right now I've had 5 or 6 calls, and they've all been very positive. So on our end, it seems to be reaching them in a good manner.
How many homes are impacted?
Can't give you an exact number. I'm going to say around 50 or 60.
You see, it's not insignificant, that's for sure.
That's correct.
This roadhouse is coming in. Pushing for Thanksgiving.
Yes. They typically, from our understanding, it takes them about 4 to 5 months to construct. That's their typical schedule.
Overtime.
They were working on Labor Day.
They've been given free reign from their owners.
That same page under Department of Public Works says we completed 99% installation of safety bollards in the parking lots at Carrollton and Cedar Hill School. That didn't make sense to me. Why are we doing maintenance on bollards at the schools?
Yeah, it wasn't really a maintenance project. It was just assisting them in installing those bollards for safety purposes. They had requested our assistance in doing the installation, so we helped them out there.
Do you have anything else? All right. And 7, we're gonna CAP stuff here. Go through the list. Andrew, do you have anything to say before we start?
And kind of preview this. If you all want to turn to page 34, we'll talk a little bit about the organization of the pages, and then obviously, you'll hear from each of the department directors and division managers going through their requests. There are some recurring requests and also some requests that were already, kind of considered by the Parks and Recreation Commission. So we'll probably just breeze through those, as council is already committed to several of the items for multiple years in a row. So, and then we'll see where we're at with a couple of the policy decisions that remain. First and foremost, though, I really want to thank the staff for really putting this together. This is a lot of work coming and bringing this. You think about capital all of the time, but it's a lot of work to really think through and plan and have materials to present. So thank you to the staff, Max and his team in finance, Carly, really all of the division, the department and division leaders that we have out there. So thank you. Keep in mind, they're also putting together a completely separate 428 page or so document that is our operating budget. So a lot of work going on. So as you can see, if you turn to page 34, we had a very large capital request ask this year, this coming year. About $23.6 million requested, and we were able to find a way to fund just about 21 million of those. Obviously, a lot of emphasis at the lakefront, so that's a big chunk of that. But hopefully, as we go through, you'll see where kind of the differences of what wasn't funded, and you'll have to weigh in on that. So really, from an overall perspective, a really large capital campaign for us, which is great. We have some big projects that we're getting after. and that have resulted from a lot of years of planning in some instances. So a couple things for specifically this board, but then ultimately the Common Council to consider. You know, we are recommending a plan to use the majority of our ARPA dollars. We can get into that sort of after the presentations and where we kind of wind up and what we need to decide. But really, we're utilizing to get after some very much needed fire apparatus, which is a big focus of this capital budget, as you saw. We need to find a way to get those items done and begin planning at least for Station 2. Those are really big numbers in this budget, but really the major priorities we have right now.
Andrew.
Yeah. Yeah, so we received about $3.9 million. We have until the end of 24 to commit those dollars. There's a lot of reporting. What we're really trying to do with using ARPA now is really just swapping that out for one of the tranches of $1 million that we usually have in cash to fund this capital project, and accounting for ARPA with a large road contract or something like that, as opposed to several little projects here and there. And then we don't have any constraints on spending the $1 million. We don't have any time constraints, so the council, other groups can take and weigh in on where we want to invest those dollars. So with that, are there any other questions at this point, or do you just want to start rifling through some of the requests? Okay. I guess who's up for, and we can follow along, very well organized here. We can just page through these requests. You have the narrative, and then we'll get back out to the summary and talk about what needs to be decided.
Doug, you ready? All right.
So starting off, there's two requests from applied to community development. One is the first phase of the streetscaping plan for Drexel Avenue. The second is a park and open space plan update. I'm not sure which one comes first on your agenda, but we can talk about Drexel first. I mean, the Drexel plan has been in place now for probably a little close to 2 years now, and we've gotten some options with respect to, how to fund that. Certainly, it is within the purview of the city to use TIF dollars from any number of districts that are within a half mile of that, and that is exactly the planned method of funding that. The estimate range between $3.4 million from a plan which is really mainly focusing on the medians, and it goes up to, I believe, $4.8 million for something that's more extensive, including some of the shoulder areas and the areas adjacent to the right-of-way on either side. Does not include street lighting. That would be something that would be additional. So the approach that staff has taken into this is to have a plan which is scalable, both in terms of geography and in terms of the elements of the streetscape. So what we're proposing at this point in time is really for the portion that's the westerly portion of the project from essentially IKEA Way to the railroad tracks. And that would be, again, 3.4 if everything in that plan were to be put in place, which, again, it's scalable in the sense that if there's some monumentation that, it just comes back as being, too capital intensive, we can certainly make adjustments off of that. But it is using TIF dollars from TID 12, TID 11. I don't know if 11 is being targeted on this one, Andrew. It is. But ultimately, if we want the entire route to Howell Avenue, we would involve 11 and 12, and maybe even, 15. So with that in mind, I do have some examples. In terms of what the scalable nature of that is, if you're interested. But we'd be looking for the board's recommendation for approval of $3.4 million to $4.8 million for the Drexel Avenue streetscaping plan.
I could just add to that too. Thanks, Doug. This is a strategic action priority for the Common Council. So this gateway is completely articulated in that plan. So it is important to us. You see there's a downsizing, and it's one of the major downsizes that doesn't get us up to the fully requested amount. This is just a phase one project for us. We really like to focus the intensity, maybe not even on the way to all the way to the railroad overpass, but you know, South IKEA way to 13th Street and maybe taper down from there a little bit. We can add to this over time, and as our TID districts, you know, TIF districts continue to perform. But you know, certainly that's a lot of money right now to be spending on, you know, streetscaping and monument signage and things like that. I think we can do a phase one project and then move forward after that point, after we maybe even gain some knowledge on what to do and not to do moving forward for the rest of the corridor. So that's why you see the difference there.
I wholeheartedly would agree. This can be phased in. This doesn't have to jump at this. I'm not quite sure I'm comfortable with the payback. You know, it's like, what are we getting for $5 million that's going to enhance Drexel Town Square? To me, that payback seems pretty slim. The only comment I have on this is that I would definitely would like to include the street lighting. I know you put it in there, Doug, that'd be another $500,000 for street lighting, but I think that's a high priority in that plan there. Street lighting up and down Drexel.
I also have a question about the railroad bridge. Have we talked to the railroad about cleaning that bridge up a little bit, or are we gonna take care of that expense?
We've actually talked with them a lot, but nothing really seems to ever get scheduled or really kind of, you know, gain any forward momentum. So we, in all of, actually in each of our overpasses in those adjacent tax increment districts, we have, I believe, a budget in each of those to beautify the railroad overpasses. So it is a priority. That's not, I think from a community aesthetic standpoint, that priority is never going to go away. We just need to find a way to really work together on that.
At least we should clean that up. It looks a little rough.
Yeah, I mean, the strategy, kind of conceding the fact that the railroad's not likely to be entirely cooperative in our efforts there is to really take those approaches to the trestle from both sides and kind of draw your attention away from that with some other features.
Problem we used to have with graffiti on the bridges.
No, I've not noticed it as being an issue on that bridge.
I think the PD used to keep that under control a lot of times.
As this is kind of an adjacent conversation, you know, you bring up the railroad. There's an item later on with the American Avenue improvements, and you know, not funding those was not a statement on whether we should do those. It's really just, you know, finding a global settlement with the railroad company to make that structure what it needs to be. As you saw, you know, we may have to take the folks on the road to traverse that, and that's really not ideal. So can we put something together, and also in combination maybe, or nearby the design of Fifth Avenue, whatever that ultimate solution is.
Drew and Doug, can you provide a little more detail on what the $2.5 million for the phase one would get? You mentioned, is that just median work then?
That would be primarily median work, yes, and the monumentation and the wayfinding.
Signage?
Yes, definitely signage.
Hasn't really
I don't know if the. Something up there.
Andrew and Doug, maybe you can shed a little light on considering this is a phase one, I know we did this project was
I don't think well, certainly the scope from South IKEA all the way to Howell with really by and large, a similar level of intensity all the way is probably where we overestimated or underestimated the cost, but kind of overestimated the vision. That's a long ways. That's 1.5 miles at least. So, we really need to, I think, focus. Maybe this is a phase one. Maybe I don't think the options that Doug has in the presentation are mutually exclusive, where we have to just focus on median for phase one. We can probably incorporate designs that we like and put together a project specific to our wants and desires at a budget we're able to work with.
So, I mean, to be fair, I mean, the majority of the capital investment is within the median. And there's some signage and some landscaping on the exterior of the roadway. So this is, IKEA Way is going to be on the left. As we move further east, obviously it's going to be to the right. This is the stretch from IKEA Way to the freeway. And as you can, very much. But it really, the concept, and I can go back and show it to you from the plan itself, is to really incorporate a series of stone and this kind of, we call it a Corten steel wall within the median, low walls that provide opportunities for appropriate landscaping and for signage, and even there's some lighting opportunities to really kind of accentuate the corridor. This stretch of the corridor is unique in the sense that a good portion of that is under the area of the influence from the interchange, and thus state DOT does have some very specific requirements as far as what can and can't happen in their area of influence. So you'll see that maybe as we get closer to the interchange, it drops off quite a bit. Drexel Avenue, as you're aware, is a city street. So once we drop out of that area of influence, the city has a lot more flexibility and options with respect to how it treats the medians and what kind of structure they have in the medians. Obviously, we're not going to do anything that's not safe, and it's not in accordance with accepted engineering and traffic control standards. But we do have a little more options as far as how we treat those. So you can kind of see there's a lot of landscaping in there, and one of the things that they wanted to incorporate throughout the corridor is these kind of groves of trees, appropriate trees within those medians, and that's obviously something that the state did object to. So you'll see those kind of drop off. The area that you see here, that's kind of a curvilinear combination stone and this Corten steel wall, and obviously you can see some landscaping along the sides, and there are, where you see, two is a secondary monument sign. I don't think we have any primary monument signs. We do, one here. And you can kind of, I'll show you those just because it'll make a little bit more sense. I don't want to take up too much time this morning. It's important just to get a sense of what, you can kind of see in this kind of schematic how there's these series of this curvilinear wall with kind of the grove of trees in there. That was for the majority of the medians. I'm trying to find a.
Doug, is that depicted with their current lighting, or is that new lighting?
That looks like it's the current lighting. Kind of see it a little bit better here. Looks like find one with. Kind of see, and these aren't designed yet, but you can kind of see how these kind of median primary entrance monuments might be appropriately placed off the freeway entrances to kind of signify that you're arriving in a special location, and kind of see how the night treatments of something like this might be with some lighting effects, which I thought the Plan Commission really did like the ability to kind of present a different presence at night. Kind of a schematic of those kind of primary entrance signs. And there's some opportunities for some secondary signage, which is just a little bit smaller versions of these. And I think this is where these are probably gonna be pretty capital intensive. So, I mean, that's when in terms of talk about scalability in terms of, the capital and the infrastructure, you know, whether we could go, you know, 2 major signs and with foregoing some of the other ones. I mean, that's where our flexibility, I think, will lie. But I think the commission and certainly staff would like to keep some of these elements in place as part of the project.
Yeah, we can certainly come back with a more detailed conversation on this as well. I realize now we should have probably had this group look at this as well, so.
So, and this is kind of, you can see as we move further east, how some of those treatments would be. This is the area from the freeway to 13th Street. You can see as we move from 13th Street east towards the railroad trestle, I mean, given that we have essentially total control over our right of way, that we're able to do a lot more things in terms of what happens in those meetings.
So Andrew, as a framework,
We can, and you know, with the budget we're allowing for phase 1 potentially, we're going to be designing a project a little bit, you know, so we can definitely have your input on that.
one thing I always ask, you can see what's happened on 27th Street, investment in this kind of stuff.
There's some maintenance responsibilities, absolutely.
Crash into it.
Who's been taking care of 27th Street? Has it been a joint thing between
It was the
Franklin
27th
Oak,
Street
or was
bid,
it
I
the
think.
county?
Yeah.
No, I mean, no, there was never a bid, but it was always as
Isn't there a
part of,
bid that goes
oh, it goes to College. Oh, you're talking about north of College?
in general, that whole, actually it's south, because I noticed it.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff that was done as part of the 27th Street reconstruction in Franklin and Oak Creek, that's not maintained by the bid. That's unfortunately just maintained by
Not maintained.
it's meant being not maintained essentially. I mean, that would be
It's
some,
project or
yeah, and on some of the streetscape things themselves, I mean, the cities would be responsible, but for just the general maintenance of mowing grass and what have you, that's, you know, I think that the county does that.
county mows the grass. But the stuff that's there.
Well, it's a potential maintenance nightmare. I mean, it was no different than Howell Avenue and Ryan, et
Sure.
cetera. It was always the county's responsibility, and they never did it. So we turned around and jumped on it and started planting our own shrubs, et cetera, into the medians, only because we couldn't stand the way it looked.
Yeah, I mean, that's the unfortunate reality of where we are. And if you want things to look nice, communities have to make that investment.
Not even nice.
I think we've had neighbors down towards your neck of the woods that were turning around and maintaining the boulevards on Howell Avenue.
Yeah. So globally, Andrew, you guys good with the 2.5 on the initial phase 1 of this? Yeah. Bob?
Fine with that.
All right, I guess are there any questions on the outdoor recreation planning from Doug?
Just very, I think the pay, and Dale, you talk about payback, and that's I'm glad that always enters the conversation. In order for the city to be able to apply for grant funding under the state stewardship plan, you need an active, an ongoing park and open space plan. We're out of compliance right now. You know, we've tried to do that in-house for multiple reasons. We just haven't had the resources to pull it off. But if we're looking to make these significant investments in the lakefront and we want to capitalize on some state funding, we do need to have a plan that's in compliance. There's a pretty wide range of values there on, whether or not we go with the sewer packs proposal at 25,000, or if we go out to bid on a consultant to do that, and that's where the range lies. It really is a matter of with sewer pack, it's a matter of time frame. You're kind of at their mercy, but it comes with a reduced cost. But if we wanted to get this done, which I think we do, so we can be in a position to apply for grants for some of the lakefront park items, we can go out to bid. And I don't think it'll be $100,000, but things being the way they are these days, it's been kind of crazy. So we want to have that flexibility.
You actually expect to get something useful out of this, or just check off the box?
Well, it's both. Obviously we're spending a lot of resources on some of these micro geographic areas in terms of the North Bluff and Abendschein to a certain extent. But this kind of does take a global picture at what the needs are for the entire community based on recognized standards, and it'll point out deficiencies. And there are still deficiencies from our previous park and open space plan that have not been addressed. So it's not just going to be focused on the lakefront; it's going to be focused on the entire city. But you're right, Ken. To a certain extent, it is checking off a box.
Andrew, I see you have did kind of a sewer pack funding level.
I think there are also other options to explore that would maybe be more expeditious than sewer pack, but that's certainly $100,000 is a lot of money. So I think there are some options we can explore. And Doug even alluded to, this is a range. If we need some more monies over that $30,000 and we can get an expeditious plan, we'll come back and have that conversation too.
Either that or do it in-house.
Well, we've tried that. And
Try it again. Is that high of a priority?
that's always an option. Yep.
Move on to engineering.
Yes, please.
All right, 39. Matt will be up here for a while, so.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having us here. So I'm going to try to get through chunks of these, since a lot of them play together in certain areas. So we'll take the first two, the North Lakefront Bluff Stabilization Revetment and the Phase 1 design and Peter Cooper building demo. As you're all aware, engineering has been working very diligently on stabilizing the bluff, the old Peter Cooper site, which is actually failing for the last 5 or 6 years with the higher waters of Lake Michigan. We're actually closing in on getting all of our permitting for that. We have one more to get from Army Corps, but they have pretty much assured us that that's coming. And then dealing with Milwaukee County, which will just be kind of a rubber stamp approval. And then we plan on going out to bid for that work. And that's why we're asking for the little over $8 million on that item to be paid through TID 13. To achieve that, we're estimating right around $10 million. We've already have a little over $1 million through grants and other funding available. And then the other item was the Vista Phase 1 design. We're currently working with Edgewater Resources on the planning study. I think that was shown to Plan Commission last night. We're estimating anywhere from $10 to $15 million for the full park. So our estimate for design is about 750 or 1.5 million, actually 10 to 15%. We're asking for a Phase 1A, which is about half of that, 750, and then the building demo, which is the old white building that's out there. Everyone probably pretty well aware of what that is. We're looking to demo that, and we got a price of about 1.5 million, or estimate from Ramble, our environmental engineers, and that would include the demo of the building and potentially the crushing of all the concrete out there to be reused on site. Any questions on those?
Yeah, man, what would be the time schedule to complete that project?
The revetment and the bluff stabilization,
Yeah,
we're probably looking a little over a year. I think that's probably a good estimate. It really depends on availability of materials. I know that there was some delay on the larger stone that would be part of that revetment and the basically breakwater protection of it. So a lot of it will depend on materials, staff, labor, but I would estimate right around a year, over a year for that. We do have the soil. That's the other thing too, is we're already getting the soil from MMSD. We're placing a lot of that out there, and that's going to be used for filling in part of that bluff stabilization. So we do have material on site, so that should help with that timing.
How's your memory? Bender Park, how long did it take for the stones for Bender Park? That was years, wasn't it?
I don't know about years, but it seemed like it went on for a while. I mean, that's.
That was
you know, oh, that could be.
Well, that was part of it, but certainly not all of it. Exactly.
But that's why.
From my understanding, Sue in and out of our department has been working with Edgewater Resources, and they're identifying locations for that type of stone. So they've done a lot of work the back end to see, the sources, which I believe is like northern Illinois and Wisconsin area. So, I mean, it's not a very far. It's just a matter of making sure that it's available.
A lot of stone. That's why the price is so high. Under that same project, it said that there's 2 other property owners. Who is that?
That is Canal Beezer property, which is just directly north of the water intake. And then High Night, which I believe has some private fifth properties. Okay, they purchased that from High Night. So it's 2 separate property owners. And they're currently working, I think, our attorney and that are currently working with them in order to obtain that portion of the lakefront to be able to do that revetment and bluff stabilization on it.
So do we have any level of comfortability with these people? I mean, High Night, I assume, is basically defunct.
Yeah, they've been purchased by Fifth Properties, High Night. I think Andrew probably can speak better to that.
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty far along in friendly partnerships with these entities, because they realize the benefit of us coming in and doing one project, and the city taking on the responsibility to do so we can have that cohesive project. They see the value in that. So there is a lot of motivation there for us to, execute necessary documents in the next several months.
Well, I mean, not that they get a totally free ride. Maybe they can co-pay a little bit part of this, because they're the ones that are going to be significantly benefiting from this as well. So you have to play that off the cuff.
And part of this is as well that they would be essentially dedicating areas adjacent to Lake Michigan so that we would have that continuous parkway along the lake. That's all part of the negotiation. And as I believe as well, and correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, I mean, the option to include them as part of the project and coming up from the south actually saves some construction dollars as opposed to coming in from the district's property.
That's correct. And by having them, or if it's a private entity trying to stabilize their bluff, they actually have to start from the water's current edge and then work back. So by having it and them providing that area to the city, feeding that over, that allows us actually to go out into the water and create, basically provide more land and availability for that ribbon park. So there's that benefit, and I think they see that as a plus and a cost savings to everyone, and better product in the end, actually.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
What do you?
So, we haven't looked at really terms of borrowing yet. That would kind of, the more detailed financial plan would come after this, because this isn't the only project we'll be doing. It will be coupling together a few investments. But I would say that, the TID donation strategy that we employed and had approved last fall really does provide the capital for these projects that we didn't know quite when we would get in that district. And it's a long tax increment district. So these are, you know, we're not pledging any general property tax levy to support these major projects. Actually, none of this capital program is funded by the general property tax levy. That's important. So that TIF strategy really enabled us to get after the really well planned and most importantly needed bluff project. We just can't let years go by on stabilizing the bluff, otherwise we won't have a bluff to stabilize. So that's really important to the city moving forward.
Andrew, in regards to these, a lot of times we're pulling this, you know, TIF money out to support some of these. Does the city have to go back to the other taxing districts to say that we want to expand these TIF districts as far as the money part of it?
So there are physical territorial amendments that you can pursue in tax increment districts. There's also financial updates and things that you can also pursue amendments to the original project plan, which we've done, you know, dozens of times probably over the life of us using TID in the city or TIF in the city. But yeah,
I mean, in essence, we're pulling money away from the school system or the county or whoever. You know, we're delaying monies coming back to these people.
Yeah.
And somehow I'm just not comfortable that they're in agreement with
Yeah,
this.
through those TID project plan amendments, they have to actually opine officially on those approvals. So, you know, generally speaking, they defer to the city making the investments, which is good because, you know, we're putting the skin in the game. And what how tax increment districts are set up is they put skin in the game, but only by their willingness to wait for additional tax revenue. So there's really no risk associated with those other districts. And we do need their approval, though, to execute these strategies.
Matt, I have a question for you in regards to the demolition of the building, the Peter Cooper building. The narrative in the report states that there'll be crushing of the cinder block wall, concrete slab. That Ramboli has given estimates for that work and the remediation of those items. Any concerns with soil contamination or nothing going in the game? Well, what did I miss?
Hold on to your britches.
We're way past concern for self-contamination.
Well, I'm the new guy, and I've been through this on a personal level, so.
It's there.
I mean, the benefit of being able to crush and reutilize that concrete, it stays on site. So it saves you money.
Sure.
Instead of having to test it, get it off site. So that would be utilized under, you know, any kind of new structure, parking lots, things of that nature, where then it's capped with either asphalt or building.
So part of the demo then doesn't include any type of digging into the soil where we would be concerned about finding contamination.
No, at this point, it will just be removal of the existing concrete and
okay.
building.
Okay.
But having said that, we have enough data and knowledge about the sites in general that, I mean, there are other issues that are being addressed outside of the building demolition.
Question, Rick.
We're concerned.
Was that funny?
Any other questions on those two items? All right, move on to Abendschein Park entrance and park lot expansion. Recently, we received bids on the Abendschein Park Pavilion. We haven't moved on that item at this point, but in preparation of not awarding the contract, we have some needs in that park still that we need to address. The use of that park is obviously everyone's aware through pop-up beer gardens, frisbee golf course, the baseball, actual use of the trails. We have cricket tournaments throughout the time. The park is utilized on a daily basis. So a lot of the issues that we're seeing and realizing are the park entrance is well under-designed and doesn't really function the way it should as far as efficiency and safety. So that'd be one of the improvements we would be making, and this also plays into the subdivision that is proposed to the east. It would help with that connection and movement of traffic. The parking lot itself, we have funding through MMSD of $990,000 to install permeable pavers, curb gutter, storm sewer, everything would be included on that, and that would be fully refundable. So that's why we're asking for the $400,000, and that would be for the entrance only. Questions?
Take it a step further. Does anybody have any comments or concerns going all the way down the engineering's list? Pedestrian accommodation on American Avenue.
Bill really wants to be done with this assignment of his on the board, I guess.
No, a lot of these are
We-
repetitive.
We appreciate
You know,
that.
this is a follow-through of previous stuff, so.
And I think for this one, you know, Matt kind of summed it up. You know, we were designing for a pavilion project that could really, you know, serve as maybe a beer garden. We were working with an operator to have a partnership agreement, and the bids came back extremely high on that building. We need to go back to the drawing board a little bit on the structure itself. So we thought, let's take care of these needed infrastructure projects, and it might be a more logical sequence this way anyway. So hopefully we can get that project back on track. You know, we strive for that, but that's going to go kind of in parallel in thought to this project now.
I have a question for Doug. And that development subdivision that's just west of the park, are they still going to use that road or access that we have into the park?
Only for emergency purposes. So they'll essentially be, and I know what form it'll take, whether it's a gate or what have you, but it's not going to be an access point that's open to the public.
Okay.
But it'll be there in case we need it.
Thank you.
Right. But
We're
I guess
good on-
where do we want to move to? I guess I'll leave it up to the board here. Which items? I'm going to discuss any if you have questions on any of them. They are, like Dale said, pretty straightforward. I guess one that I would want to bring up is the 6th Street improvements from Drexel to Marquette. This is probably more of an important one and informational for you. With discussions of the water and sewer utility, they have some deficiencies on their water main that runs from Drexel all the way to Rawson. They are anticipating replacing sections of that over the next 3 years. First year would be from Drexel to Marquette, and the following would be from Marquette to Rawson, and then down Marquette from 6 over to Howell. So this first year, piggybacking on their plans to replace their water main, we're thinking that we would, resurface, repair anything that we had through there. This also plays into the item for the 6th Street Bridge design. We have funding through the local bridge program with the DOT, and our design takes place this year, or this following year, in 2023 with construction in 24. So this project's kind of all play together, kind of go together cohesively. So that's why we're requesting that money.
That's why it's a no-brainer.
I'd like to bring it up if you have questions.
Really, I referenced the American Avenue kind of quandary earlier too, and that's really not to discount the merit of the project, but just some better coordination, probably a more comprehensive plan for that stretch, with the railroad for sure. Taking them on street maybe isn't the best option, and if there is some cooperation we can get in the next year or two maybe with the railroad to have a better project for that, I just wanted to call that to your attention because it's not for lack of merit. We know what's going on over there, so.
Currently there for
Yes, it's probably not, we haven't done any, engineering
But it
or
is what it
reviewing
is.
for
I mean,
safety.
You have immense
Yeah.
bollards for
Right, we'd have, we actually been in some correspondence, or I should say, one-sided correspondence, with the railroad in regards to their intentions with that overpass. Most recently was in the last week. I reached back out. We're using our community contact for that through their railroad, in regards to if they have any plans in the future and how we can work together, to address our needs and their needs at the same time, like Andrew alluded to. Unfortunately, we have not received any correspondence back.
Softly, but carry a big stick.
Try.
Same thing's gonna happen with American Avenue.
Correct. Yep. Have any other questions on any of the items, or? I mean, this is my first time, so you're gonna have to bear with me here. I'm kind of working through it.
Pewits and Liberty, you want to have a conversation?
Yeah, we can have a small
quickly?
conversation on that. So Pewits and Liberty intersection design, we originally requested funding and we received that. We did go out through RFP for that design in 2 phases. Phase 1 was more of the evaluation of that intersection to provide alternatives, and there would be up to 4 alternatives, and then we would pick that preferred alternative, and phase 2 would be the design. The estimates that we had that came back, basically, for a roundabout design was 30,000 over what we had budgeted. So we're requesting an additional 30,000 just in case that became the preferred alternative in the future, and we could go into that design in 2023. We're currently going under contract with Grafe for phase 1, and we're finalizing the contract as we speak. That is 28,000, I believe, 28,138 or something like that right now, and then the design is where the money really comes into play.
program.
Well, that would be part of the design. So there would be vision. We'd be looking through whether we need any kind of vision changes. We have surveyed all the way past County or Country Drive, I believe, to the further east and to the west. We've got to take into consideration that railroad. So there's a number of.
Long-term vision was to have at least a four-lane boulevard to 13th Street.
There's now consideration just going with a twiddle. There are thoughts on that. So there are a number of options, a 2-way left turn lane.
Okay, I was
In the
just saying,
center.
what was that?
That's an acronym for engineering. So it's a 2-way left turn lane. We call it a twiddle.
Thank you.
But yeah, that would be another option that would actually reduce the footprint, still function and create a high efficiency within that roadway, which is basically you try to get that traffic out that turns left. So instead of adding 4 lanes right now accommodates well over 30,000 vehicles a day. We have around 11 or 12,000. There really is no projected numbers there that are going to reach that.
Unless you build a ramp at the freeway,
Yeah,
you're not
so
gonna get that volume.
there's no reason to over-design. I'd rather, design for what it's really needed for instead of spending that extra dollars.
So you've been around long enough, you probably had thought about that boulevard design on Pewits. You were around long enough that you probably were part of the original thinking on the boulevard design.
I seem to recall that at one point there was a consideration for grade separation there.
And the cost on that is too much. So, yes, there was consideration, and actually we do have a design on the shelf with 4 lanes and boulevard section. We're reconsidering that. There's a number of reasons for it, and it's your culvert, railroad, and really the need. What is the need? And to me, after reviewing the data and the traffic, there is no need for 4 lanes in a boulevard section.
Talking about, at one point in time, Pewits Road will have to get improved. And it's at that point, do you turn around and put a bridge across the railroad tracks, or don't you?
Right,
That would be
I
a
think at this
challenge.
point that the cost
It's prohibitive.
is, yes. And I think we'll take into consideration the different options on how we will handle traffic going to the west and those improvements in the future with this design. That'll be part of it we'll look at, but I think right now we have to look at the functionality and the efficiency of that and safety of that intersection of Liberty and Pewitz.
No denying that intersection is a pain in the butt. However, safety. So do police records indicate, are there more than an average amount of accidents or violations at that intersection in other areas of our city?
Well, in other areas, yes. Does it go over the threshold? No. But we'll, that's off our initial looks and review of the data that we have. Well, that'll be part of the evaluation.
I didn't want to jump too far ahead on engineering because I have a number of engineering questions. But I want to go back to American Avenue. So we don't have any issues above American Avenue? Is that a safe assumption?
There's issues, but I'm just going to address those issues, Andrew, a little bit farther down the road, correct?
So informing the timeline is the source of funding. This is adjacent to and directly included in our TID 13 project plan. So improvements to American Avenue and Fifth Avenue are all planned for in there.
Well, I'm just saying this line item is where I want to initiate my more advanced discussion.
Okay.
So if you're responding to the fact of American Avenue, I'm just worried about, are we done debating everything above
I'm sorry.
American Avenue? On this
Literally
list?
on the list?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So my question with American Avenue then is, my concern is safety. Again, you're looking at taking it from, say, Fifth Avenue over to Chicago. I agree. There's no sidewalk or anything there, so it's crap. But in my opinion, there is immediate concern walking underneath the bridge. So what's the potential for throwing 50 grand at this next year or something and paint the line, something, put one of these fancy barricades you're talking about buying at the PD, put something there to allow safe pedestrian or bike access underneath the bridge. And at least do that for now until you come to agreement down the road with whatever you're going to be doing down Fifth Avenue for improvements along the lakefront. Throw something at money-wise to turn around and make an improvement walking underneath the bridge for now. That was my recommendation on that one. What do you guys think about that?
Well, Dale, you remember that there is a dedicated pedestrian bike thing on the north side of American Avenue.
Is there?
Yeah.
Yes.
There's a raised area.
It's not pretty, but it's there.
Whether
That
there's
was my main concern.
Yeah.
it's
already there.
There would need to be improvements to be able to utilize that, because right now there are none. Let's make that clear.
Yeah.
So
I just ride by it. I don't.
yeah, there's and I drove by it yesterday, so just to look at it. The railing is in question, I guess, as far as safety and whether it meets any kind of the standards if we're going to start
It's seen
putting.
paint in a few decades,
Probably that, and it's probably rusted out and probably not secured. So there would be some.
Good summer job for some summer students. Put them to work over there.
There would have to be some, some coordination and looking and making sure that we did it right if we're going to put somebody
I
up
never
there.
decided
There is a ramp on one side, on the other side there is not. So I mean, there would be some coordination and some make sure that we did it right and safely. So
that's a stopgap.
that would be an interim measure, definitely. most definitely.
We wouldn't have any objection to including a small budget, or conversely coming back after we look at some options, as we don't necessarily need to allocate anything, but we can. Well, and I mean, it depends on if we can work in that space that's not ours, too, and what we want to be doing there, and
I think that's
instead of
what
the
we'll do.
railroad company,
Do it
which is
just
important.
faster for
So yeah, long long-term, you ought to be doing something because there's no sidewalk running out the rest of the way down to Chicago Road. So put this on the back burner would probably be a good idea, at least for now. The next one, Stormwater Equipment Fund. Going down to the cost analysis, I didn't think the dollars equated here. It says this request is for $75,023 as an annual installment to this equipment replacement fund with the intent to request additional contributions annually to build up this reserve fund. The current fund has a balance of $75,000. So with this request, the balance is going to be $2.25.
That is incorrect.
Yeah, clearly
Yeah.
it doesn't add up in my math.
Should
So
be
something's whacked
150.
there.
Must have been an oversight.
Yeah, it should be 150.
Okay.
Eagle Eyes down there.
We'll make those.
But we've used this fund, Matt, for, why we bought a couple street sweepers out of this, maybe a backhoe at some point.
That's correct. Yep. Continue to help and aid in purchase of equipment for DPW to do ditch work and things
Street
along those
sweepers, I
lines.
think were $250,000 a
Yeah,
piece or
we
something.
purchased 2 street sweepers, yes.
No, with the stormwater fund as well, just always keep in mind, we have impressively low stormwater impact fees in our community, comparatively across the state. So we're still maintaining that
Giving it
with
away.
some of these projects.
And on that deal?
And that one. Next one, I have issues with. Yeah, I got some issues with this one. The robotic survey equipment. $35,000. Let me ask the dumb question. The utilities got this same equipment. Why aren't we utilizing the utilities fancy stuff and not buying more stuff for city halls?
So with the system that the utility has, they have a GPS system. With all street improvements or any kind of surface improvements along a street, we are required by federal law to update and correct our crosswalks. The issue with the GPS is it does not have a tolerance level that's acceptable for vertical. The robotics, well, and one other thing too is when you're under any kind of tree canopies, you lose that tolerance and you lose, the vertical part. The robotics is a system, it's a one-man crew.
But doesn't the utility have this same stuff?
They do not have robotics, they have a GPS system. So we have an older GPS that's 15 or 20 years old that we would utilize still for
I
that.
agree.
Yeah.
If
So our
there's-
robotics is more of a, it's more of a tolerance in getting us into what's acceptable for us to do our staking and providing that type of work.
It's not compatible. Move on. Mike, why are you guys from the PD and the fire department hiding in the back row? Get your buns up here. There's questions to be asked.
We're gonna finish up with the engineering first.
Is there any other concerns on engineering? We covered them all.
Ready to move on, we can move on.
Good for engineering.
I am as well.
So fire department, part of the larger picture here is really financing some needed fire apparatus. That was really, those were the bigger pieces to this puzzle in the end. We built this budget around those priorities, which we firmly believe in. So with that said, we'll talk about some investments here we need to make in our fire apparatus, and Chief Gressick, take it away.
Good morning, board members. Now, before I start, I'd like to take a moment to recognize somebody I brought along today, Laura Yoakum, our new executive administrative assistant. So Laura's ramped up. She has experience in budgeting from her previous employers. She's ramped up beautifully with our budget. And certainly this is a continuation of her onboarding and development to get a feel for all the components of our budget process. So many thanks to Laura for her efforts in helping us establish our documents for this year's budget. As the city administrator had stated, this is a capital-heavy budget for the fire department this year. Many of the items in our request packets have been part of our 5-year rolling CIP plan with some modifications moving forward. And I'll talk a little bit about what necessitated those modifications and maneuvering into this budget year. With the board's permission, I'd like to start with the 3 pieces of apparatus because I think that forms the foundation for our capital requests this year. The first being our ladder truck. We are requesting approval to replace our 1999 ladder truck. Typically, our past apparatus schedules have been 20 years on engines, 25 years on aerial apparatus. Now, the NFPA standards do not necessarily dictate when apparatus should go out of service, but it recommends at a 10-year mark, you start to look at that apparatus for safety features compared to new apparatus. And at 20 on engines and 25 on trucks, the consideration is to replace those vehicles because of changes in the safety equipment and performance measures. Our truck is a 1999. The 25th year of service for that truck would be 24. Currently, lead times on fire apparatus are 26 to 28 months. So an immediate purchase today, I'm looking at 2+ years before that vehicle arrives. So what we looked at is the potential to include it in this year's budget, get ahead of that, get into that ordering process with an anticipation of a 24-25 delivery. Tied to that request is an engine. We are requesting a replacement of a 2003 model year engine. That would put us into next year on the 20-year life service of that vehicle. Again, same dilemma as far as lead times on that, the 26 to 28 months. So again, I'm looking at a 24 or early 25 delivery on that piece of apparatus. Both the engine and the truck were spec'd out as close as possible to our existing apparatus. So our most recent engine purchase in 2016, which is located at Station 2, we followed that spec sheet to utilize that as our cost basis. The same with the truck. Now the truck was a little bit more difficult since in 1999, so many things have changed in the design and build of those apparatus. They got as close as they could based on a 100-foot platform aerial with a pump. Third apparatus request is an ambulance. Now, obviously, for our department, 75 to 80% EMS, our ambulances experience some extreme mileage. We are looking to add another Braun into our fleet and then place our oldest Braun ambulance into reserve capacity. Again, as with fire apparatus, we're looking at a 2-year window on the delivery of those vehicles. So again, we're kind of doing a little bit of disaster planning, looking ahead. By the time we get that ambulance in, we're going to have 2 additional years on our oldest ambulance. So there is a little bit of a balancing act with maintaining those vehicles ahead of that delivery time. So certainly when we look at the apparatus for this budget year, we see a bit of urgency in getting those orders placed and then working on the maintenance over the next 2 years to keep our fleet sound until those apparatus can be delivered. Again, that Braun ambulance is designed on our current spec sheets for ambulances. So we're not changing the dynamics or the design of our apparatus. We're basing it on what we currently use, but understanding there are going to be emissions and safety features that are going to change the look of these vehicles and some of the costing. Talking about the costing on these apparatus. Maybe for our council members, when I presented regarding our dorm project, how far behind I got on the cost estimates with that. I've talked to Pierce and Braun twice over the last 4 months in preparing our request. And the prices change each time based on their supplier costs, based on labor costs, and based on availability. The packet that you received, our quotes for the engine and the truck, are the most accurate through November with the 6.5% price increase. Most Pierce and Reliant won't tell us what 23 holds for a price increase. But based on where the costs were 2 to 3 years ago, we would anticipate somewhere in the 6 to 10% range. Our ambulance is spec'd out at 380, including the power lift system. We feel confident that that is a very tight number right now, and we can maintain that. Moving forward, the unknown with our ambulance is, again, they told us it's about a 2-year cycle for the delivery of it, but they won't guarantee a date. I'd be happy to answer any questions about those 3 pieces of apparatus.
Chief, I've got a couple of questions. Are we experiencing significant maintenance costs currently on that older equipment? I mean, is there the availability of replacement parts? I know in other departments, you know, they're saying, hey, we can't even get replacement parts anymore. Are you seeing that with your equipment?
So I'll start with the truck. The truck goes through an annual and a 5-year testing process to ensure the reliability of that apparatus. We see associated maintenance costs just based on those tests and keeping that unit certifiable. Of course, additionally, the wear and tear on rigs, as they age, we see costs develop on that. Now, I will say this about Pierce apparatus, is there's a lot of proprietary parts on those apparatus. So as you get to the 20 and 25-year range, the availability of those parts decreases. And that creates, you're looking at a rather large system overhaul and revamping of systems if the original parts aren't available. Our maintenance budget, and I think the council will see this as we get into the budget hearings, vehicle maintenance budget is under extreme stress right now. Typical costs in the past have increased substantially. We are currently experiencing an issue with an engine right now that is projected at this point $28,000 to $42,000 in maintenance. Without a doubt, a newer apparatus should have an increased reliability and maybe the golden ticket of warranty, which covers a lot of cost early in that life cycle. And like any vehicle, any facility, as it ages, those costs just go up.
So the request is not unreasonable, given that we're seeing significant expense in keeping our current machinery operating.
The current vehicle maintenance budget will continue to expand and I'll specifically speak to the engine and the truck with increasing costs. Yes, absolutely.
A second question. The revenues that are generated through the auction or through the sale of the used equipment, does that just go back, or is that used to offset or defray the purchase price, the cost of the new equipment, or is that put into a particular fund?
I'd have to verify that and respond back with that answer. I believe that is a general fund allocation, but certainly I would defer to city admin and finance on the mechanics of that.
I have a quick question. The usage of your ladder truck, how many times probably in a year do we use that truck?
Great question. So looking back at 20 and 21, 796 total responses during the 2-year period for that fire apparatus. Obviously, the aerial truck responds to structure fires, bread and butter operations right there. So when you take a look at our history of structure fires in the city, that is the frontline response unit out of Station 1. So typically, total number of responses in a year could get close to 100, meeting the correct alarm type. Additionally, that rig will provide support if the engine at Station 1 is unavailable. So it would respond as a support vehicle, it would respond to natural gas emergencies, it would respond to motor vehicle crashes at the extrication level, and depending on the overall availability of apparatus, it may run to EMS calls. So the use of that vehicle is much like an engine as far as the type of responses it could address. But for 20 and 21, 796 total responses.
Thank you.
I think that the ladder truck has seen better days. Probably a good thing I'm walking away today because I remember when we bought that truck, okay? Mike Rutz and I drove it home.
You came back on that truck.
Yes. And we stopped probably somewhere up in Washington County for an accident as the first responders to an accident. Believe it or not, that family we stopped to assist was an Oak Creek family. The first call for that rig on the way home. And, you know, I assume that the fire department is still in love with Pierce. They build a great product, and so I assume that's where you're leaning. That's a custom truck. Everything about that truck is custom. It's one of a kind. They build it to our specs. So when you turn around and try to look at getting replacement parts for some of this stuff, they don't exist. Certainly some mechanicals, I'm sure, are available, but a lot of things on there are all totally custom, and they build a great product. So I'm going to turn around and push the button here and tell you that we paid cash for all of those trucks back then, that we didn't borrow one penny for those. But if I'm not mistaken, that ladder truck only cost $550,000 back then. And that engine, we did the same thing. That engine was probably in a 350 range. So prices have gone up significantly. The ambulances, you guys got to stay on top of that. You got to be buying one every couple of years. You don't want to be riding a piece of crap. So I support every one of those issues on that. The only concern I got is on the engine. You got a TBD on where we're going to pull the hat money from.
Yeah, so we're very confident that the EMS fund balance has plenty of dollars, plenty of funds available to it to pay the ambulance in cash. And we were striving to do the same thing that was achieved before. How much can we pay in cash? So the ambulance will be comfortably paid for by that fund balance. The ladder truck, what we're proposing is, and it goes to the conversation we had briefly earlier, using the ARPA dollars for one or two or just a few larger purchases really then alleviates us of the timeline to utilize those ARPA dollars, but also provides for easier reporting mechanisms than 20 or 30 little projects like hand railings on American Avenue. But while important, I don't think Max really wants to account to the federal government for the purchases of the materials for the handrail, so to speak. So with that, the engine then, so that's the way we're funding the large ladder truck with cash from ARPA. And then the engine purchase. So we don't have enough ARPA cash left over. Certainly we don't want to utilize $936 or $940,000 of the $1 million we have, because then we're foregoing a lot of other priorities in the city. However, we are coping with that lead time. We would love to be able to say, if we decide yes, it's a go, we can get the engine within a year. But this is 30 months out, and if we don't act now, then we're just back in the back of the line, and we're pushing the decision off. It expands exponentially. So we're saying that the conversation in the engine probably dovetails with a future borrowing for the fire station project, which the fire station, pretty sure we'll talk about that next, but the Common Council will be asked directly what their strategic vision is for doing a fire station number 2, at our strategic planning workshop session coming up in October. So I'd imagine figuring that out is going to be a priority for the community. So we'll have various spots where maybe we're borrowing money for land or et cetera, that we can fund this as a last resort, fund that with a piece of debt that's coupled with some other projects. So we have a couple years for the Common Council to figure that out and different funds may become available to where we can reduce that safety plan of having to borrow for that.
Amount of funding is needed for PC equipment.
So there are, as I believe it was listed in the quote, there's really three options. There's a cash upfront option, which provides the largest discount. There is a chassis purchase option, which provides a moderate discount, and then it's just the ordering of the rig with the anticipation of payment later.
Is that for all three?
That is for the two engines, explicitly listed for the engine and the truck. The Braun ambulance, there are payment schedules later through the process based on the availability of the chassis and then some of the components that we outfit our ambulance with, the cot and lift system.
Arguing about the equipment.
Any other questions?
Okay, I've got more questions on other fire stuff.
All right.
I'll take the lead into Station 2.
That's where I was headed.
From the point of the city administrator. So our proposal and our request this year is to begin the process for the identification of the future of Fire Station Number 2. We have a 57-year-old facility, and our internal evaluation of that facility, along with the Building Maintenance Bureau, identified some system concerns as far as mechanicals in the building, some energy system concerns. When we look at the potential replacement costs of those, they are quite high. It's not a matter of simply replacing parts or systems, it's retrofitting them into a 57-year-old building. So we see this as an opportunity now to discuss the future of Fire Station 2 with three really alternatives in front of us. We look at, is there a full-scale renovation of that building? At the end of the day, that is the potential, but then you still have a 57-year-old bones of that structure. Is there the ability to build a structure on that site? It's a rather limited site right now, but does present an option. Or the third option, which the fire department supports the most, is this the opportunity to take a look at alternate locations for that fire station? So that station's 57 years old. The city was extremely different when that station was built and located. And is this the opportunity now maybe to identify a placement that expands and enhances the response district of Station Number 2? Some preliminary studies we've done internally have identified some locations that we feel are strategically superior to the current location based on current run volume, projected development, and travel times in that district. So conversations with city administration, our request is to substantiate our internal review through the use of possibly a consultant to look at locations for that station and consider the early stages of land purchase and design of that station. There is a little bit of a nuance with that as far as understanding where that location might be. It's a little difficult for us to gauge land cost at this point, or land availability for that matter at this point. But we feel by starting the process with a review of location or options for that station, along with some design estimates that might get us a better estimate of costing for the station, and the consideration of a land purchase is the recommendation for our starting point. Be happy to answer any questions about that.
I have a question then, Mike.
Yes.
Response time for that station, is it 7 minutes to any location within that circle of Station 2?
No. So we started our initial study by looking at travel times within that district. And the standard nationally is a 4-minute travel time. So we identified the current station location and mapped out where could we reach with a 4-minute travel. get pretty good grasp on, based on our existing location, how much of the Station 2 district that covers. And for familiarity, that's the east side of our city, Station 2. We also planted that 4-minute travel time into what we see as a potential alternate location for the station, and try to see what the benefit of that movement would be. We found that there would be an increase in the number of population, the number of people served by making a movement of the station, as well as existing buildings and parcels. So our analysis has been taking a look at the travel time, seeing what is the biggest area of District 2 we can cover with the best location to kind of maximize our response. We're a big city. We've got 3 fire stations. So those travel times, there's always going to be outliers. As much as we try to cover every area of those districts, it's just a large city, right? We think this is an opportunity to maximize what we can cover, though, by considering the location of that station.
Thank you. You guys have that's really the only land left.
That's the big one. Taking a look at what is currently proposed and planned for, and understanding where the other available areas are. We've also balanced that with existing call volume. We can't necessarily walk away from where our existing call centers are, because those probably won't change. And those generally right now are concentrated right at the north side of District 2 and the south side, right off Chicago Road. Now, understanding the development potentially to the east off Ryan Road, that has helped us gain a better understanding of what the future of that location might look like.
The land acquisition, similar type building, servicing an engine and ambulance, or what are you envisioning there?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of discussion that can take place about that. We, right off the early phase of that discussion, see a satellite station. Very much modeling the current station as far as the resources that would be deployed from there, but certainly taking a look at the living and educational and training accommodations for the crews.
You're assuming you're going to have standard is, schedules maybe fire is going to operate under its standard 24-hour shift.
Correct. The station would be, absolutely, Alderman Gale, the design of the station would be based on our current deployment, 24-hour shifting, yes.
With the station that's going to be replaced, will that just be demolished, or does that have any type of purpose? Keeping that building?
I don't know that I could answer that at this point. I think that structure could have some purpose for the right person or group within the city. I think that'd have to be explored. And once we have a grasp on, is that station going to be moved off that site? I think then there's an opportunity to discuss what the future of that site and existing building could be. But I'd hate to speculate on that one right now.
You have a cell tower on that property?
I do not know. I believe there is, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Maybe I'm thinking of the tornado sirens or something.
It's pretty distant from there too.
This way, all in all, I wholeheartedly support the fact that moving that station, that building has seen better days. There's no question about it. And probably from an access standpoint, you're probably better off moving towards Chicago Road, would be my opinion, because you're expecting a lot more development along the lakefront. So I think it would be key to be more centrally located there. But I would take a step back, people. We did this 25 years ago. We bought property for the 4th station off of 13th and Oakwood That property's still sitting there to the best of my knowledge, and we've never put together a plan. I think it behooves us to turn around and start thinking outside of the box. One of the things I always promoted is we don't need a fire station. All we need is a place to turn around and house a paramedic unit. So either put a house on that property or sell that property and buy a house and stick a paramedic unit in there around 13th and Oakwood. That's how you serve your people.
That land is still in play, yes. That was, as far as my understanding was, and that was the goal of that land in the past.
I rest my case.
Dale, that harkens to the fact that, EMS, fire, much of different practice.
And to that point,
That's why we started the paramedics. He was one of the first guys.
first class. And to,
you?
and I
Yes.
was, and to your point regarding that, the change of the fire service today, I think for, you'll see in personnel committee some concepts related to that. Very preliminary, but I think that we haven't forgotten that aspect and the potential for how do we address a changing demographic and response model.
Given the amount of capital we're looking at committing to the department, you gotta make sure you're really looking at things that obviously we aren't the first ones.
It will be a countywide discussion. Every department's going through the same thing as they try to replace or modify capital, right? You know, we're not getting the bad deals on the engines and everyone else is getting the good deals. Every department's struggling with the replacement of apparatus. Every department's struggling with station location and placement. And, you know, when we look at what we respond to, you know, there are some core functions we provide to the community. And absolutely, are there adjustments we can make to our response model? There are. And they're balanced against the core functions that will always remain no matter what. You know, suppression is always going to be a core function of the fire department, albeit from a volume perspective, maybe less than in the past. EMS is an increasing call function for us, as well as the preventative aspects of EMS as we start to venture into preventing those EMS calls from occurring. You know, the trick right now is balancing those items to provide the best value to the community. And that's, you know, there are some growing pains with that. We are looking, you know, we've had to make some hard decisions on how and what we want to request. But the balance is what we're trying to achieve, maintaining that coverage within the community, all areas of the community, while branching out into the areas that maybe can flatten that call load increase for us. So we are considering it as we move forward.
Another one on fire. First Watch software. Talk to me about that.
Absolutely. So, as I hope everyone knows or already does know, we are an accredited agency. So we base a lot of our decision-making on the information we have from our calls, the data we obtain, the analysis of Station 2 and potential locations for Station 2 is based on that. That's culling data out of our records management system, analyzing call response times, call volumes, what incident types we're seeing, and kind of building our model off of that for what makes sense for that area of the city. So we're all firefighters. We're not data analysts. And the ability to go through that information is laborious. It's time intensive. I'd like to tell you that I have a group of people that is able to do that. Right now, it's myself and Laura acclimating herself to that position. The value in that data and making future decisions, we need an easier way to do it. I'm not going to be with the department forever. Laura has other responsibilities, and finding somebody else to gain that knowledge can be difficult. We're looking at a piece of software that's utilized already in Milwaukee County that will allow us in real time to analyze our call performance and display that call performance internally for decision making. It'll allow us the better opportunity to publicize it through our website, so the public would be able to have greater access to our call information. You know, it provides an easier pathway for obtaining the necessary decision-making materials. A request with that is just that, is to take away some of those data analyst hours that we spend a lot of time working through the data and have a system that allows us to grab the data and start to make decisions right away. It's an expensive piece of software. It's a very powerful piece of software. It provides us a lot of opportunity. One area I've overlooked is the value that that information has on a day-to-day basis for our crews. For our crews to understand what their turnout times are, what their travel times are, and their total performance on calls is important to them as they look at their performance on a day-to-day basis and the service they provide to the community. This software also allows us the ability to get that information to our crews in real time. So at the point that call occurred, they can measure their own performance against what the data is telling them. So obviously, we look at it, yes, as an expensive piece of software. We see the value intrinsically in our organization of alleviating some data analyst hours and be able to show our data better than we have in the past.
A couple of questions. What's the useful lifespan of this software?
As far as before it becomes obsolete,
Correct. Personal operating systems changing all the time. With this type of software, does the company provide support, updates, so it doesn't become obsolete?
so your annual support fees do provide updates. It accounts for the updates that the software undertakes. Now, what the software is doing today provides us 7+ years of functionality. The biggest component of this software is it's built on the accreditation model already, and a lot of the data it spits out at you is based on that modeling and formatting. So that has some longevity right there. The company, in our interactions with the company through 2 separate meetings, we did get the strong impression that the input provided by their customers does drive design features into the future. From a longevity perspective, I think like a lot of software applications, this seems well maintained. It seems like it is built upon each year. And I would have comfort in saying that it would serve us for.
Has capability for updates, obviously. Then.
It does.
Okay.
It does. And I think some of the costing we broke down, I think we broke down 5 options in our request, is based on some of those functionalities, right? How many features we wanted to include in the programming. So I would say I have comfort with the longevity of that software.
Annual impact on the budget, $10,000. Is that just support from the company?
There's your support fees. Yes,
Okay.
those are support fees.
So just to help move this along, the item I think has a lot of merit. You know, I wasn't really in a lot of conversation with Chief Kresick until the budget request, and really love to learn more about the programming, how it meets the departments and the city's strategic goals. This just didn't, you know, in our estimation, I guess, bump out another piece of equipment that we could use, and of course, you know, the fire department did okay, presumably in this budget as well. So meeting some needs of some other stakeholders, of course, is very important to prioritize, and this one just didn't rise to that level this year, but, you know, you very well could be hearing about this again.
Chief, are there any other communities that use this software?
There are in Milwaukee, so, and Tom and I were talking about this earlier before the meeting. At the last paramedic contract discussion, there was the software, the FatPot, the CAD-to-CAD software that was included, and that each municipality has responsibility for supporting and is deducted from our paramedic contract fees. This software is also offered at that time as part of that, where the costing for that software could have been removed from your paramedic disbursement. Department at that point, back in 17, did not pursue that. There are two departments, and North Shore and Milwaukee may be the two that currently utilize it.
What's your annual budget, Chief?
8. Well, I did all right this year, so it might be more. It's 8.1.
So if you're over $8 million in annual budget, 800 or 8 million? Good question. How many millions of dollars have you got in equipment? Several. My point is, I'm always concerned that we make decisions based on this touchy-feely stuff. This software provides you the capability of turning around and giving you data, giving you measurements to turn around and provide you guidance as to managing your business. I found this back when the police and the fire used to do annual reports so that you could make some intelligent decisions instead of this touchy-feely stuff. I think you need to seriously consider putting this software in. And then maybe you can turn around and say, okay, fine. Maybe I can turn around and improve the quality or level of service to the people on the southwest side of Oak Creek by putting in a paramedic unit into a Quonset hut, a tent on 13th and Oakwood. They can stay at my house.
Chief, did you have any other things you needed to discuss here?
Be happy to answer any questions. Fire gear is our typical rollover year to year. Next year, we'll be asking for a slight bump in that. You know, that has remained relatively flat, and the gear prices have gone up. So I think we need to educate ourselves first internally on what our gear options are and see how that factors in. Any questions about the Station 3 parking lot?
How many acres does Station 2 have?
That is a 3 to 5 acre site. Not sure of the exact amount though. Station 2?
Station 2.
Yeah, I can get you the exact amount. I'm spitballing 3 to 5.
Curious, if we're looking for 3 to 5 acres, and we have 3 to 5 acres, you know, we may not have to purchase land. Just something to think about.
Sure.
Got 3 to 5 acres. I know that there's not room to build another station on the site.
That would be challenging. That'd be, because it is a longer, narrow site as opposed to a square site. So your pathway into that station, the parking lot, would be the most likely place you would want to design and build a station. So you'd be eliminating a lot of. It would be very tight.
The other question I have is fitness equipment for the stations.
Absolutely. So our request for fitness equipment this year is a replacement of 2 older treadmills and the purchase of a rowing machine to round out station number 2. Typically, this equipment is purchased through some of our internal budget funding. And what we're finding is, again, with the cost with building maintenance, vehicle maintenance, that those areas are getting chewed up by just routine day-to-day things, and we don't have the capacity to add the fitness equipment in. We have a need for 3 pieces of equipment. We felt this is an opportunity to CIP those 3 pieces of equipment across all 3 stations. Currently, our department places a premium on physical fitness. Our crews are expected to perform EMS, fire, motor vehicle crash, you name it. They are expected to respond to all incident types with an increase in call volume. So I think it's obvious that the health and wellness of our members is paramount. It's very difficult to function when that bell goes off if most of your day is not spent in some sort of activity or preparatory type activity. So our goal is to replace 2 older treadmills, which are still currently out of service, following approximately $1,000 in repairs, and the addition of a rowing machine for Station 2 to match up what Station 1 and 3 currently have.
All 3 stations have the equipment?
Yeah, all 3 stations have fitness areas, yes.
Anything else? Can we take a 5-minute break?
So we're done on the painting is good for you guys too? Are you done with fire?
Yeah, that's all.
Michael, you're free.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Mike.
this, lake is for fishing.
You got an hour, you got
Yeah, that's right, we got personnel. in
personnel at noon.
We're not gonna take an hour.
So while we're waiting for Max, and I think he was probably grabbing Dick to talk a little bit about the masonry work around the Civic Center, let's go to the the CCTV replacement. And get educated on that a little bit, if you don't mind, Tom and Kevin. The other IT line item is really the, rotation of our network and our computers for all the staff that we budget annually, so.
Good afternoon, members of the board. Tom Kramer. I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Want to describe a little bit where we're at with this?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, the CCTVs, cameras.
So we're requesting to replace 80 cameras. When the cameras were put in to City Hall, they were already pretty dated to begin with. We've reached a point where we can't continue updating our software further because it's not supported to record these cameras. Our biggest concerns right now is that we can only record 24/7, where normally we would record motion only, and that is to save money on how much space we need to allot. We are not reaching the 120 days retention required by state law, so we are trying to replace these cameras with models that will allow for motion, a better compression method for smaller file size, and allow us to hit that retention rate.
Makes all sense to me.
Correct.
I know. We're good.
Great.
Easy.
Thank you.
We jumped around that. So, unless there's, we'll move back up to maintenance now, but unless there's any real questions on the DPW service door replacement, we'll focus some attention and hopefully be efficient with your time here on the Civic Center masonry and window flashing. If Max, you wanted to kick that off at all, or are we just going right to the building sage here?
I think it's Kulka's fault. Would you turn around and invest that money in those cameras?
That's not my decision.
What do
There
you
you go.
mean?
Very, very well done, Dick. Very well done.
Gone already.
I love the way you
I
turned
think
around.
Dick meant to say yes. He would.
I love the way you did the pictures. The pictures are worth 1,000 words.
Well, and right now those cameras suck up a lot of hard drive space. And the new ones use just a fraction of that because they use a different method of storing the data.
Thanks.
You know how it is. Technology changes every 5 years, whether you like it or not. It's a mess.
Is this shitty design or is this?
Well, some of it is the window part of it is a problem from they didn't flash it correctly. And by that,
So the Masons did this?
yeah, and he's dead. But anyways, the wall comes down, and if the window sits here, what they did is they came across where you see those brown pieces of metal above the windows to support the brick above that. Well, there's a piece of metal that comes down over the top of that and then turns down. That's supposed to catch any water that gets behind there and bring it out to the front of the window and drop it down. But the ends, so you got a piece of metal that's, the width of the window, but at the ends, they were supposed to bend them up, and they didn't bend them up. So now the water just gets on the metal and runs to the end and then runs inside the building.
Beautiful.
And there's a lot of
Is
windows.
that everywhere?
Well, everywhere that there's a window with the brown trim above the top. That piece of steel, they call it a C channel.
So you only gave us one picture. You have to do this to every one of these?
Well,
Or you
I don't think we can afford to go every window. I think what we do is kind of do it as they fail. Otherwise, it's huge. Now, that's the window portion. All these short walls that you see out here that have the handrails on and stuff like that. Well, a lot of them, especially like on the library side, you'll see that there's a railing through the top of what I call the capstone, and they drilled a hole in there, put the steel rail in, and away they went. Well, the mortar was too wet, and it shrunk. So now that holds water, and that's literally taking and cracking the capstones on the top on the library. It gets down inside the wall, and it's actually pulling the wall apart. Also, all of the joints between the capstones should have been caulked instead of used mortar on it. So there's 300 joints that have to be ground out, and then the rubber, they don't call it caulk, can't think of the name of it, but it's a piece of foam that they put in there, and then they caulk over the top of that. So it's not this thick of caulking.
It's obviously got to move with.
It's got to move, and there's no place for it to move. And then it's where the stone are sitting. Some of the stone actually, if you look at the handicap ramp, not handicap ramp, I'm sorry, the ramp going down into the garage, all the mortar under the joints is blowing out because there's no place for that mortar to go. It gets in there, it's wet, it freezes, it destroys it. And handrails all need to be repainted.
Thank God you're addressing it now, because you wait another year, it's gonna be
junk.
twice as worse.
It's going to be junk. And I guessed how much it's going to cost to fix it.
Big job.
It's a lot of work.
What about the clock tower we have?
You want to buy it?
Just be real brief if you want to update them on this project, but it's really the subject of the request that we're talking about.
Right now, what we're doing is we're replacing all the metal flashing all the way around the building because the paint's all falling off of that. They've started that. They've got a fair amount of that side of it done. The clock tower roof has no paint on that. So they're going to tear the metal off of there. The gutters are gone now. They're going to tear the metal off, and there was no way to get any equipment in there to work off equipment, so we had to scaffold it. That part of it was almost 50 grand just to scaffold it. They're gonna, and as long as I'm paying to put scaffolding up, we're gonna repaint all that steel where the clocks are, between the clock and the roof, because why spend 50 grand to paint it? So I'm having it painted right away, and also there's still some leaks in that clock tower from day one that it gets into the library in the quiet reading room, and I called them. After all this rain, I called the roofer and I said, take a look. While that scaffolding's there, you've got a perfect opportunity so you're not hanging there trying to figure out what's the matter and find that leak. Because otherwise, it's almost impossible to get at it. Yeah.
Why we pay you the big bucks.
Yeah, right. Which chick are you looking at?
Having fun now.
Mm-hmm.
These are, nuisances along the way. You build a $25 million project. We have a lot of knowledge and wisdom in Dick. These are the things that happen with a $25 million building. I mean, it's not, I know it's our responsibility to take care of them and bring them forward, but these things are bound to occur, and Dick is just able to diagnose exactly step by step how it got to where it is. So that's why we have such an abundance of information, because Dick knows how to get to the root of the problem. So you'll see this, we'll see more of this. We're going to have to address keeping the maintenance up on this building.
If we don't, it's pay me now or pay me later. And pay me later is going to be more because you've done the damage by not taking care of it up front.
Andrew, Dick, how?
I'd start it probably in spring. I don't know if I could get a contractor lined up and get them to be able to do it right now. Everybody's still busier than heck.
Yeah. Spring it is.
All right.
Good.
Public Works,
Public Works, yes.
moving through.
Thank you, Dick.
Thanks, Dick.
several of these are recurring items, and a few of these are actually items that were included really in the purview of the Parks and Recreation Commission. So with that, I don't know, Matt, if you've been able to devise a way to summarize any of your requests, any of the new requests. Obviously, this is very typical stuff you see on here, nothing really obtuse. So with that, Matt, do you have any?
Yeah, I mean,
opening
the
remarks?
majority of the items are replacement items. We have a couple of, I don't know that we even have any new equipment items. It's really looking at replacing some of our existing assets that we maintain. Obviously, one of the big ones is our plow truck. We'd like to be on a roughly 20-year replacement cycle, at least for having those be, frontline snow plows, ice operation units. We're a little farther out than that. You can see we'll be, we'd be right on track with that with this truck, where we'd be looking at retiring or getting rid of a 2003. Well, we'd actually we'd keep the truck, but we would take it out of operation as far as one of our main routes. And then we'd be looking at retiring the 1994 unit that we've been using for as a chipper truck. So we do hold on to them longer than the 20-year period for sure, but that's what we'd like to see if possible for snow road clearing operations. Other than that, you'll see that we've got a number of leases going on. A lot of our small pickup trucks, stake bed trucks, those types of things are with that leasing program, which works out really well. I mean, it keeps us in operation. We're not seeing those trucks, of course, break down, only being a couple of years old. It relieves a lot of the time spent from our mechanics doing work on previously before that program, which opens up their time to work on the fire trucks, which has kind of been a big maintenance item that we're looking at doing some replacements for under the fire's budget with the ladder truck and the engine. But it'll be probably a few years, I'm guessing, until those come around. So we do have the ability to keep those, the majority of the repairs taken care of in-house, which is nice because those are expensive items to send out. We'd actually hopefully be able to get it in the beginning of 2023. We're looking at doing similar to what we did last year and getting a demo truck, and it's really spec for the most part of what we'd want anyway. And we were able to receive that just this past year, so that's actually worked out well. So we probably, after the November budget approval, would probably in December right away be coming back to the board looking for that approval.
Matt, I did have a question on the Shepherd Hills.
Yep.
Struck me as unusual, but I guess any feel that I see it in the report you mentioned was that unusual? That struck me as that was used more often.
I think at least the softball league that uses it primarily. I think the numbers have dropped off over the last several
It was
years.
a kickball league years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea behind that is I had conversations with Matt, really brown that out before you take down the apparatus itself, brown it out and not have the availability to have lights on it, for the majority of this coming year. And then really assess it from there. But certainly we can't, persist with not doing anything with the existing age and end of life and safety concerns of the lights. So you have to, it's a pretty large investment. I know we grappled with this, was it last year or the year before? It might've been last year. It was $275,000 then, I believe, to replace the lighting. And just, with the knowledge we have on the use, that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense.
Put that money in lighting, put them in the streets.
Well, I disagree. I mean, that's a conversation you got to have, whether or not there's a need and a desire for a lighted ball field. I mean, it would strike me as odd that there's not a public park in the city that doesn't have a lighted ball field.
Yeah, we had that conversation when we decided not to fund the lighting replacement years ago, 1 or 2 years ago. And again, I don't think any decisions would be made on this until we were able to provide the data on the usage and get just general feelings on that same sentiment. You know, is this our only, you know, lit ball field in the community that's available, and is that appropriate to go down to zero? Certainly we'll have those conversations.
And the commission was looking at putting the 15,000 in there as, you know, to be able to do it if they still felt they wanted to move forward on it. You know, it'd be a conversation, I think, for the council to look at too, but it wasn't dead set that the lights would go out. Like Andrew had alluded to, we probably want to look at phasing it out and seeing if
Yeah.
there's no need for it.
The change is the fact that, you know, it's not our rec department necessarily, you know. I mean, the school district would be programming.
Oh, I'd have to go back and look at ownership, but certainly it's interesting web when we with the school district and in partnership with the school district.
But, you know, there's certain assets we own and maintain and certain assets they do. So, memory serves me, this is our parcel of ground.
Yeah, I think.
Pat, I have a question about the forklift. Is it possible to lease the fork truck rather than own it?
We could, but we'd pretty much need it, for the most part, we would need it year round. So we'd be continuously leasing it. Are you talking lease to own or just leasing
No,
from?
I'm just thinking getting a lease on a fork truck and maintain the maintenance and so forth. Is there a possibility to lease it for a period of time, 2-3 years at a crack?
We could certainly look at that as an option, but you know, it's kind of something that we need every year and throughout the year. So,
Well, we do it for some of the trucks we have.
right.
Pickup truck.
I'm just curious, that's all.
And I did have a question to follow up on Fred. You know, in our justification section, we talk about the recycling center. Look, the description says the new one's gonna be housed in the municipal building, so
Right.
that doesn't make any sense.
Because
Which
we have,
is used for.
yeah, we have two actually. So the oldest one that would be sold is at the recycling center currently. The newer one, we'll say, is currently in the garage, would move over to the recycling center. The new unit would be at the garage.
Where is it used more?
It's used at both quite often. I mean, and I had put in an option in there, could we use it in both locations? It'd be difficult because you would have to drive it on the street, which probably isn't, we wouldn't get pulled over, but I don't think it's street legal. But
I was just curious
yeah.
if the justification was going to be used at the recycling center, but then down below it said it's going to be housed in
Move the water utility garage over to city garage.
We'll
and
get there.
Take
We'll
their
get there.
forklift truck. We're talking about parks. You might also want to talk about when we're going to turn around and stick a park west of Howell and south of Ryan. No different than the fire station. Promises, promises, promises. Never see a plan. One other issue for you, Matt. The only thing on your stuff that I got concern on is explain to me why you think the segmented plow blades don't stand up to carbide.
why they don't stand up, or why
Yeah,
we would prefer
why
them?
they're better than carbide.
Well, they're kind of like, as far as forming to the surface, they're kind of like, I'd say like like compare it to a razor blade, like a Schick Quattro or a Mach 3 razor, where they're able to adjust to the different curves of the road, so they're able to get down better as you go along. Because unfortunately, our roads aren't completely level the
Isn't
whole way
that
through.
a function of the blade and not the segment? That's more of a function of the plow, the hydraulics of the plow,
Sure.
and not so much of the blade.
Well,
That's at least the way I'm looking
Yeah,
at
and
it.
these blades are actually able to move a bit
Oh, okay.
to go along with, I guess, curvatures, if that's a word, of the road. So they're able to go down a little bit where the other ones can stay up, another one can come down
A little bit more
to grab.
flexible.
Correct.
But then, if they're flexible, do they not wear out much quicker than carpet?
They actually wear out less.
Really?
They don't wear out quite as quickly, surprisingly. And when they do, you only have to replace that one segment where there's 10 segments to it. You only have to do one at a time instead of the whole blade.
So you guys started this, was this a year ago? or
Just
2
last
years
year. Yep.
So you're seeing improvements already?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the nice thing too is it eliminates, or it doesn't eliminate, it reduces the vibration too within the cab for the drivers too. So it's not quite as, you don't feel quite, everything.
Oh, you gotta keep them awake.
True.
That's all I had.
To tell those organizations, yes, you know, we'll assure you that those 2 additional parks will be ready for spring baseball.
Yeah, I think we're intending to try and get, it'll likely be the Johnstone Park. We may be able to get done yet this fall.
Oh, great.
So
okay.
it would be ready to pretty much guarantee. And then in the spring too, it doesn't take a long time to do. So if we decide to move forward with an additional park, it shouldn't be, as long as it's dry, it shouldn't be too hard for us to accomplish and
Oh, great. Okay.
meet that.
Good. Thank you.
Anything else for Matt? Thank you, Matt. Police.
Another one trying to keep his back up against the wall.
Good morning, or at least it's still morning, right?
Yep.
Chief Stecker, Oak Creek Police Department. Hopefully ours is a little shorter, brief, since we're last.
So,
Okay, so we'll start with the Suburban Mobile Incident Response Team. That's our MERT team. As you may recall, we came forward very early in the year to get a memorandum of understanding signed, as well as the rest of the communities in Milwaukee County, realizing that we do have instances of civil disturbances that do arise, and we need to have the ability to control them appropriately. But no jurisdiction other than maybe Milwaukee has the personnel to completely do that. So this was the numbers to be a force multiplier, but part of that is we do need to equip them appropriately so that they can respond appropriately and not hopefully get injured during this. So we came forward with the proposal for the 6 members of our team to get outfitted completely. I did also give 2 alternatives of not equipping them at all. However, I would not send my team out there unequipped, or equipping half of the team, which is also very ineffective on doing so. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you guys have in regards to the MERT team equipment.
David, we already have this commitment and have had this.
Yes. The commitment is, at this point, to outfit our team. They've been trained, they're a part of it, and all of these teams from every jurisdiction are now working on getting their equipment outfitted. And one of the big things that we're looking forward is being ready, being equipped, and obviously with the RNC now coming to the Milwaukee area, that's going to be a task like the DNC was on us 2 years ago.
Had a note to myself. How are these folks paid extra for this?
No, they do it out of the kindness of their hearts. There may be an overtime component to it if it is, but it would be their regular wage. The big thing with these teams is that we would rotate them in and out. You don't want them to be out there for extended periods of time because the verbal and possible physical abuse that they may be taking over that time is going to wear thin, and you want to have that refreshing, we're getting a new team in time and time again to give them a little bit of breather.
Liability on this team is
So whoever the request is through, just like mutual aid is, it'll be assumed through them.
managed by.
Correct. Whoever's requesting that mutual aid, those
That's a
always
thought
go
at
through that.
least.
That is just like,
I was an attorney, you file against everybody.
well, and that's the nature of suing people. You can sue anybody for anything, right?
All right.
The other component would be is if this does reach a point where there's reimbursement from the state because it's an emergency or federally, those are things that we afterwards we'll write, they'll let us know, and then we can try and recoup even our wages on it.
The control of this is by the community who requests it, or who actually controls it?
We have a supervisor currently right now. There will be 2 in the future that control our unit.
I'm talking when it's deployed.
It's going to be that agency that's requesting it. However, they all operate the same. So there's the MERT teams by themselves are all going to be trained the same to operate and function the same, and hopefully be equipped nearly identically. So that's part of this is you don't want somebody not equipped that they stand out. It's been shown that if you have someone that stands out in these incidents, they actually will target that person as throw the rocks at or the frozen water bottles or berate that person.
Folks have clearly delineated who's in charge of these.
Correct. So we have our internal and external that we would be both aware of how it's being handled. I obviously have the ability to not send or to have them come back if it's something that is questionable.
Have
Anything else on that?
All right, second one is the in-car video system replacements. This is year 3 of 3. We came through the last 2 years to get this segmented through. And even part of this we were able to recapture. So I believe our amount this year that we're asking for is less than what we anticipated because we were able to capture a couple of these units through the DOA grant that the state had put out that we're trying to catch some of these things on. So this one's a fairly easy one, straightforward. If you have any questions, I would be happy to take them. But this is to get us up to the similar as to what IT talked about with the new standards on how compression is, video quality. This is to get our unit deployment completely filled out at this point. So we'll be done after this next year.
Good.
All right. Body armor replacements is a similar one. Every year we have to go through and we've basically split out our department. It depends. We've tried to get this over it's a 5-year replacement federally for body armor. So depending on if we have new hires, retirements, whatever it might be, our goal is for about 20% of the department every year to do this. So we also write for a grant for this. The grant only allows us up to 50% back. So the hope is that we win that every year, but we have to budget for and get it approved for the full amount. So our estimated amount for next year, including retirements and new employees, is 11 for the $10,450 amount.
Okay.
Any questions on the body armor? All right, the movable vehicle barrier system. This is an item that came up and started about a year and a half ago. And as the police department, part of what we're tasked for is the security of the city, our citizens, anyone that's here for tourism events and visiting. Looking at how things have progressed on open air attacks or vehicular attacks on whether it be parades, fireworks, any type of gathering, that's now a large component of what attacks are being seen across the nation. We've seen it in Waukesha. We saw it this summer as well, just south of us, north of Chicago. We're trying to make sure that we're doing some part of this. So what we did is I met with Mayor Bukowicz and Andrew in January. We started our own small ad hoc committee to go through and research all this off of a initial plan that was put forward by Captain Bollender. Captain Ashenhurst was our lead on that. If we have specific questions, I'm going to turn it over to him. However, they went through everything, and our plan moving forward is we need to do something. This is kind of our phase 1 pilot to start getting it going so that we can definitely protect the square out here when we're having events go all summer long on the weekends and some nights. And hopefully be able to bolster this into the future with some other different things. And they are movable. We can move them if we have a beer garden, if we need them down for the fireworks. Using them for partial containment on the major roads when we're dealing with the parade. So on Putes Road, being able to really shut that down where a vehicle can get up to a higher speed than on the side roads.
Chief, in the narrative of your report, you mentioned that these systems were used this past summer. So we currently have a couple of these barriers?
So we were in contact with the Meridian Systems. They came out free of charge to do
Oh,
a demo.
okay.
They set them up for a whole weekend. Dave can speak
It
on
was
that.
the dog day.
Okay.
We had them out there on the square, 8 of them, which is the initial phase. I do have photos if you wanted to pass them around. As an idea, the photos are are not the finished product. The finished product would be a painted product, likely to be determined, a light blue with the city's logo.
Yeah, they mentioned the
or something
logo-
like that.
logo feature, sure.
But this gives this.
David, where do you intend to store them, or trailer from?
So the part of this, there is a trailer that comes with that, lowers down. It has a cantilever type system that you can move it around. Sorry, what was that, Ken? The trailer is a part of this package that we're dealing. So this is the full package with the trailer, the barriers, and the cart to move them around. And the way that they're set up, the cantilever on that cart, they move around fairly well. And it also comes with 2 or 4 of the not chains, but cables that you can extend them to so that they can be linked up if need be. So that's a thing that we need to work out yet on the combination of who's all involved on this. Obviously, there's components of police, there's components for fire, there's components for DPW and for tourism. So we need to get that really fleshed out. But I believe that, and Matt's not here, but I believe that that was a big part of what DPW would assist with. So our committee was fire, police, DPW. That was it. And Carly.
To be honest, the only concern after practice with the trolley system and the movement, it's 700 pounds of steel, so they're not light. The only concern is maybe the seasonal DPW. Some of the younger kids that don't have the strength or the time to practice. But we had our woman that runs a farmer's market tested it.
So one person can move one of these
Yes.
units? Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
So obviously, they're meant to block things off.
Correct.
And we'd have the
Dolly's
hand
handy.
cart, the dolly, accessible.
You know, the overall scope of this project, if we were to really maximize the analysis and work done by many public safety folks over the last few years on this, really bringing forward the imports of this with the recent events that are nearby. But you know, the longer term plan is hundreds of thousands of dollars and many more of these barriers. There is no doubt in anybody's mind that the day of, if these things were to be able to fall from the sky and be where they need to be on the day of an event, they're the top, you know, they are the best equipment we can have to keep the public safe in these forms of assaults. I think before we subscribe to, you know, $500,000 and 30 or 40 or 50 of these, whatever the case may be, in a more comprehensive analysis that was put forward, we need to make sure that they're going to be able to maintain their usability by way of being deployed, and we can actually handle this. What I really liked about this initial phase 1, that it was really symmetrical, because we at least can, with this investment, we can at the very minimum, you know, securitize the square during several events that we have here in at least a minimal format with overall safety. So we're kind of taking a step in and seeing how these will work for us in the future before we kind of go to future phases.
Yeah. Oh,
Any other questions? I know you're passing those around right now, but I think the bigger part is making sure that they look a little more aesthetically pleasing, and the Oak Creek colors and the logo on there is part of the goal. Okay, and the last one that we have is a combined police/dispatch/IT. It's our 911 and radio recorder. I will probably have Tom speak a little bit more on that when we get to any of the technical aspects, but what we have right now is at end of life. It's not going to continue recording what we need. To what extent, I don't believe we've lost anything, but we definitely need to get it replaced, and I believe that this is actually a fraction of the cost when we replaced the logger last time, right?
Correct.
So the great thing is technology is getting better and a little bit cheaper on this one. Our big thing with this is to really make sure as the police department that we're putting things into the right buckets, not just the police department budget, but that dispatch budget that we've carved out, so that when we're dealing with anything moving forward, we can capture that appropriately. And this is that item, so that's why it's a multi-department item. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to ask or have Tom fill you in.
911 upgrade.
I'm sorry,
911 is supposedly going away, being replaced.
with enhanced 911? Next gen 911? So that's not gonna get rid of this. This is actually the logger, so we have to.
I understand that.
Yeah.
My question is related to this upgrade. I'm assuming this is a county project?
The-
911?
Next gen 911 is, there's parts of it that are county and there's parts that are individual to each agency that has a dispatch center.
Would I assume the lead agency?
No, we're each our own lead agency on this. If we have a, what's called a PSAP right now, if we each have one of those, that, so all of our 911 calls, both landline and 75% currently of our cell phone 911 calls, and we're working on getting that last part shored up here before the end of the year, we take. No one else takes those for us, so we need to have this recorded as it comes in.
So things have changed, because I thought they were all functioning through the county, and it was being coming back to Oak Creek.
No,
It's been eliminated?
about 2 years ago, we started on this and came to council to make sure that was eliminated, because we wanted to drop that delay time and take our own 911 calls.
Fantastic.
One cell phone carrier that we don't have.
US Cellular is our last one that we're working on, but it's a progress for each one to get them in, and we've been getting them in since March of this year, I believe, is the first one that we took in, and it takes a month or two, and then we get the next one.
When do we project that we're going to be coming back to this body and talk about system upgrades to this
So I did have that on our 5 to 10 year plan for dispatch on its own, and I believe that we're a couple years out. I believe that every 10 years that we're in the cycle with that, so we're about 2 years out right now for that, would be when all of our current equipment is at end of life, and that would be part of what we'd be bringing on is that new part where we have to upgrade anyway. And I'll let Tom speak on that if I'm out of sync on it.
That's about right. IT is looking at possible solutions right now, trying to prepare for the future. There's some other talks with the ICC and some other potential grants that the county is looking for, but individually we are continuing to look at different options for the future.
I guess my only concern is that in the last couple of years, we've dispatch. A little worried that are we turning around and now going to have to redo some more things because of what we just reinvested in the last few years?
No. So the equipment that we just did, I think that what you're referencing is the ergonomic workstations. That was the big one in the last year. That won't change anything. No matter what happens moving forward with possibilities with the ICC, different things that they're looking at across the county, we still need this because we still need to log all the calls that come through to us, whether it's our radio traffic or phone calls or 911. Even if someone else picks it up, it still has to come to us to get processed, whether we have it or someone else has it. Some of the other items that we have, they are on those 7, 8, 9, 10-year rotations where they just have to get changed over at that time. So the big thing that we had 8 years ago was radios needed to be changed over and 911 systems. So they're both on that cycle of 7 to 10 years. And that's when we started the contract with St. Francis, because that was a cost savings across both, because we have that. The numbers are a little bit easier to absorb and the cost goes down the more items that you're purchasing at the same time under the same quote. So we're never going to get out of that cycle of having to buy new equipment.
Has there been any more discussions between departments about combinations, getting back to a central dispatch for the
There has. We've continued with St. Francis to do that, as well as another agency that's looking at it as well. One of the things that we need to look at is how many can we take on before we need to either expand our building, which is going to be very costly, or find a different standalone place to do it, which is also going to be very costly. So there needs to be a good review as to who's coming on, what it's actually going to cost, and who's paying for it.
Again, part of the original building plan for that department that was designed to handle Cudahy, South Milwaukee, St. Francis,
I can tell you that it cannot, and we even got rid of the lunchroom and expanded extra. So that building was also set to house, I believe, 90 some officers, and we're already running out of locker space at 63. No problem. Any other questions?
Close the checkbook.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
So if I may, Chris, if we could go back to page 34, we'll kind of take inventory of where we're at, and then and remind you if there's any changes you'd like to make or further discussion you'd like to have, then we'll have that now. So as I mentioned before, 23.6 million requested by the departments and division managers. 20.988 of it is funded. So with that, where's the difference between what was requested and what was funded? A $2.3 million decrease in what is essentially the project of the Gateway and Drexel Avenue, and I think there were a lot of nodding heads here that we're good with that. But that's the major piece here. Of course, American Avenue we put on hold a little bit, pending maybe some interim provisions we could make to bolster the safety or efficiency of the pedestrian crossing that is there now. And of course, the budget kind of revolved around placing and getting on at least order and committed those fire apparatus. What also is appreciable to note is the entire budget really being able to meet the requests of the departments who know their needs best. We really didn't use a lot of cash that we have on hand. If you look on page 34, we have a equipment replacement fund as well as a building replacement fund out there that we've been seeding away for these long-term needs or emergencies. Both of those are at $1 million ending last fiscal year after moving some things around and replenishing. You see the equipment replacement fund, we're only taking 371,000 of that cash, and for the building replacement fund, 130. So we still have a lot to work with there. Typically one of our priorities after we look at how we end in our general fund each year is how do we replenish those funds to get back up to at least where we were when we borrowed kind of from it for this budget. So really we're not, zeroing out any funding sources we have for really accommodating the budget request by and large here.
Anything else?
I would be more than happy to make a recommendation. Richards would move to approve everything that the city administrator has listed in his recommendation. But I would also include money for the First Watch software for the fire department of $85,000.
For a second?
I guess I agree benefit to having that software, especially with the thought process of locating a new station two? I guess I'm wondering if the cost of that software could just be rolled into the $750,000 asking for, start the study for
I would not be opposed to that.
property acquisition,
Be compatible. I would amend my motion to that if you would second it.
Funding source.
The 750 that's already there.
coming out of fire impact.
There a second?
You know, if it's the pleasure of the board to include that, you know, we'll look at that as an option, including it that way, but we'll have to look at the, you know, the logistics of that. But if it's a priority, we'll provide the common council some options with how to fund it if it's a priority for the board.
Me either. I mean, the fire department's getting $4 million in equipment. I can't argue that the software wouldn't be a necessary tool for the department. I just question the urgency of that software. It's not like people are flopping over on the street and dying because they don't have this software available to them. You know, I'm of the opinion that the department has received a significant chunk of the budget change right now, and that First Watch software be considered for next year.
It's either that or they just need to figure out a better way within that $750,000 that they're already asking for that siting to do that study that's necessary for that location.
Yeah, and Bob, I don't disagree with that.
And
I
then-
just, yeah,
right.
but I got a tough time with another $85,000 after this
And I
department has
guess
been
what I was
allocated.
saying was, it's not gonna be in addition to that
Yeah. So if they can
it's gonna
figure
be-
it out-
It would be a part of it.
Andrew, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Motion second. There-
Alright, so how's that gonna work?
Were you second, Bob?
Recommendation to council.
Well, we'll include that you want that funded.
Well, obviously you
Fire
didn't think it was
impact.
justified, so I'm perplexed why we're going on that route.
I didn't know enough about it to be real comfortable with all of the utility of the software at that cost. Obviously, in deference to Chief Kresick, we can have internally a lot more conversation about the merit of that and how it, you know, how it testifies to their transparency and data-driven decision making. But, you know, we sat in budget meetings for I don't know, 16 or 20 hours one week, and this was one item that was brought up, and it was a little bit new. And certainly, we can continue the conversation about it. It is probably meritorious,
It's not widely used, he said City of Milwaukee, one of the suburb used.
Or shore, large unit.
And I would just like to add two things. So, you know, with the funding for Fire Station 2, land purchase and design, you know, a site selection process, you know, we may engage a consultant to do that data analysis for us. So I wouldn't say that this software is absolutely necessary to do the requisite analysis for it. And then I think the other thing that we need to be very considerate of is that, you know, when you're implementing a piece of software, it's not just the time of the fire department to implement, but also our IT staff. And currently, we're having some challenges staffing that. So, you know, I have concerns from a capacity standpoint to say, yes, you know, we can get after this, you know, in the early part of 2023. We already have some large pieces of software that we're trying to implement, and the biggest one being LandNav, which is the whole property tax billing system, and that's not going very smoothly. So I would have, again, concerns trying to move this forward, just given some of the capacity challenges we're having with our existing
So we may have a natural technical pause where it makes sense for Chief Kresick to bring this back next year anyway, if we're not
Yeah,
going to be
I
able to
think
do
so,
anything
and that's
with
where
it.
I would get concerned that we agree to this amount, you know, the charges to start working on it in the first quarter, and then we don't have IT resources to dedicate.
Max, thank you for bringing it up. Yeah, we'd spend $85,000 on software that we couldn't use. And for who knows how long.
Or
So,
maximize.
yeah, thank you for that point.
So we need to,
Well, we gotta. We have a motion and a second already.
right, that's. Yeah, okay. So if we have do we have a second?
Bob seconded.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
I provide an alternate.
all right.
Oh, good.
Well, can't do that either.
You wanted to
Finish with the
bury it
first
in
one.
All right, so,
Well, does someone second and then we just
So
vote?
Dale's motion is,
And then we vote on it.
so if
Yeah.
Dale's motion didn't have a second, if you said you didn't second, then it doesn't have a second.
right.
Then,
Said council.
so then you, another motion.
Another motion.
Well, I'm gonna move then to approve the capital improvement request for 2023 as approved and discuss.
City administrator's recommendation.
Dukenyak, second.
Roll call.
Dukenyak, aye.
Gale, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Turns aye.
Scully, aye.
Gale, move to adjourn.
They have another motion.
Roll call. Oh, you haven't,
It's on the, do we have anything agendized, Dale?
Part of this. Richards moves that we investigate the proper purpose and location of the fourth station based on the property that we already own. Where's the plan? Costs you nothing, people. You want to do anything with it, sell the property. Tell the people you're not going to turn around and service them in your district.
This, I mean, rather than adding this as a part of this year's budget, a lot more discussion.
It doesn't cost you anything.
this used to be on, in the discussion, when Chief Rosendich was here, when I first started, because I did ask for it and about it because it was in my district. But he told me at the time that it was kind of just been suspended until, for a variety of reasons, so.
I think I hear the message loud and clear from a directional standpoint for staff, but, you know, Chief Kresick is going to be focused on Fire Station 2 for the foreseeable future. And as long as we don't, as, you know, Dale kind of is putting it, I believe, is let's not be, certainly if you're not going to get proactive about analyzing it, we better not be foreclosing on options in the meantime. That would be what I would say, is we got to make sure that we're also planning, at least as we're making decisions on Fire Station 2, what are the next, you know, investments in capital mean for the fire department, and we kind of look at that as far out as we can.
My point being is that 20 years ago, we thought it was fruitful to turn around and schedule for a fourth station because we thought that would help on the level of service. We acted on it, we bought property, we put it on the map, And since then, we turned around and put in Station 3. We paid cash. We turned around and we relocated 1 and built that. Now we're going to relocate 2. In the meantime, we have done nothing on 4.
Yeah, I tell you, Chief Cressy has never.
I don't care if he did or didn't bring it up. My point being is this body, the Common Council, approved that plan.
That Common Council's not not seated anymore. This Common Council has not heard a request from the current fire administration to actually examine that.
So then what's your plan to do with the property? That's all I'm asking.
I don't know if we have to necessarily address that right now.
Why?
Why do we need to address it? It's not, we mow the grass and we maintain it. I'm not sure why you would have, whether there's any, you have a motive or a desire or compelled to actually look at doing something with the property. It gives you options for the future. That part of the city is not done being built out, for sure. But we have not actually examined what type of fire service or what fire or medical service you're going to provide in that part of the community. So these are ongoing discussions, but Chief Cressy has not done a thing to prioritize discussion on that particular site or expanding service in that part of the community.
Who's ultimately responsible for the safety and welfare of the?
We pay our staff to make those recommendations for us to examine.
So Common Council does not accept any kind of responsibility?
It's not been a priority, Dale. It really has not been prioritized by fire management, which we are going to take as the leading driving force in that fact.
So make a motion.
Next second.
And before we adjourn, I just want to thank Mayor Richards for his years of service, this being his last meeting. Thank you for all of the insight that you always bring, and thank you for your leadership. Roll call.
Yak, aye.
Gale, aye.
Guzikowski, aye.
Richards, aye.
Aye, aye.